Welcome to Eternal Family Adoptions, where members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints share stories and secrets of building forever families through faith-centered adoptions. I'm Donna Pope. Join us as we discuss how our faith can guide our adoption journey and create family connections.
Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Eternal Families Adoption Show. I'm joined by Donna Pope. Donna Pope is the founder of one of the premier adoption agencies in America called Heart to Heart Adoptions, located in Sandy, Utah. She's been working with adoptions and has been a respected leader in the adoption community for more than 25 years, and she's also a very good friend. Donna, thanks for putting this together. She's the visionary behind the Eternal Family Adoptions.
Well, and you are the way that it's been created, so thank you.
Donna has a pretty impressive resume. She served as the chairman for the Utah Adoption Agencies Consortium. Did I say that right, Donna?
Yeah, you did.
And holds a position on the Utah Adoption Council's governing board. She has a background in healthcare, is a lifelong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And how many families have you helped create through adoption, Donna?
Oh, over 2,000.
Wow.
And those are the ones we've created. Now, we've worked with a lot more than that as well.
Okay. So do you want to is there anything else you'd like me to say to introduce you?
No, it's just that I love the gospel and I love adoption. And so this show is to bring those two loves together. And I also am so glad that Nathan is joining us on this. Nathan, why don't you tell them a little bit? Well, I'm going to tell a little bit about you. I've known Nathan now for decades, and it's funny to say that. But I watched him as he was doing adoption.com and saw the great good that he was doing there. But even more importantly, I got to know his wife and their 3 girls, and see the love and the testimony he has of the gospel. So he's brought those two loves of adoption and his love of the gospel and the church together. And that's what this whole podcast is going to be about.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me be part of it. So Donna, what is this show going to be about? I know you've talked high level. It's bringing together this passion you have for adoption and this passion that you have for the gospel. But specifically, why are you doing this show?
Now, I've been doing adoptions for almost 3 decades now. And I started out actually working with LDS Family Services. They needed someone to take care of their birth moms while they were pregnant. And I had an extra room. And so I would have these birth moms come and stay in my rooms, one of my rooms. And I got to know them. I also got to know many of the people that worked with LDS Family Services and walked the path with these women as they went through their pregnancy, had the baby, and then placed the children for adoption. And I found that I loved these women. I found that they really mattered. I also had a sister that couldn't have children, and she worked with LDS Family Services to adopt 3 of her children. And what a change and a joy that made in their life. So I got involved in adoptions in that way. And then in 2014, LDS Family Services decided no longer to do adoption services. And that kind of surprised many of us because what they were doing was so important. And quite honestly, it upset many members of the church that were thinking that they were going to adopt through that means. But they decided that they were no longer going to do it. Well, I had a conversation with some of the leaders of LDS Family Services, and I said, well, what about all these families? Because at the time they had 600 families that were at various stages in their adoption process. And one of the leaders said, well, we want you guys to step up and work with these families. Well, it's been over a decade and we haven't done a very good job. We haven't done well at helping members of the church know how to proceed in their adoption journey. So one of the major things we're trying to accomplish here in this podcast is to help members of the church know what to do when they're thinking to adopt. Nathan, how did you get involved in adoption?
Thanks for letting me share that. My grandmother also worked with LDS Family Services and provided some interim care between when babies were born and when those babies were adopted. And I'm told she did that for a very large number of babies. And that influenced my father. And my father became an adoption attorney and practiced in Arizona. And then I went to BYU, went on my mission. I'd never heard of the internet before my mission, my freshman year. And while I was in Brazil, I fell in love with the street children. And, I'd give them the change out of my pocket. And, as a missionary, not earning any money, that money quickly ran out. And I vowed that I would do something to make a lasting difference in the lives of these kids. And I came back and the internet had exploded while I was gone. And I was in a program at BYU. I wrote a thesis on how to use the internet to help children through adoption, and ended up winning the BYU business plan competition in 1997. And my father invested the first $10,000 to get us started. And I've ran adoption.com for decades, and it's kind of felt like living in a Hallmark movie. I've been so blessed to be part of so many fun adoption stories.
Thank you. That's great. And so we want to bring for this podcast these two loves and these experiences together, because we know that there's listeners out there right now that are thinking, how do I adopt? I want to increase my family or have children. I can't do it naturally. How do I adopt? And so we've been doing this a long time, and we want to walk you through the very steps that we can do. It was interesting because I think he'll be okay if I share his name, but Bishop Pace, well, actually President Pace of the General Sunday School Presidency, his son has adopted through our agency 3 times. And so I've gotten to know them and their family really well. So love them. I just think they're amazing. They're just amazing people. And one of the funnest parts about the adoption is that once in a while we get invited to go to a sealing. And this little baby that we watched be born and then placed with this family, we're able to go to the temple and watch this sealing happen and all the emotions that are part there. Well, I did this with the Pace family, and we were standing there in the sealing room, and I was talking with President Pace and with his wife, who had been mission presidents. And they said, we need to tell some of our missionaries about you guys. I said, what do you mean you're missionaries? Meaning, because they had been mission presidents, and so they had all these missionaries that now had come back from their missions and had gotten married, and some of which were not able to have children. I said, well, tell them to adopt. They said, well, and there was this long pause, and I said, well, why would they not? What would be the reasons that would keep someone from adopting? And he said, well, actually, she said, well, there's really 3 reasons. One is they don't know how to go about doing it. They just don't even know what the next steps are. And they're a little afraid to figure it out. The second reason is the cost, that there's a financial cost to it, that they can't afford a house yet. They can't buy a car. And so there's this financial cost that goes with it that's scary. And then the third reason is that they don't know how they're going to feel about loving a child that's not genetically theirs. And if that child's nose doesn't look like theirs, or maybe even their skin tone is different than theirs, will they be able to love that child in the same way that they would a natural born child? And as I sat and had this conversation with them, I realized we've got to address those issues. because these young men and women that are married, or even some middle-aged, we want to address that so that they can have the opportunity to adopt, and the joy that comes with that both Nathan and I have seen with many, many families.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen this over your career as well. I kind of love it when people have that concern. Donna, I love that question that you raised about, can we love a child as much if they're not our flesh and blood? And the way that I like to answer that question is if I had an emergency adoption situation and you needed to temporarily take this child into your home for the weekend until we could find a permanent place for that child, there's probably a 95% chance that by the end of the weekend, you're going to tell me, there's no way
I'm keeping
them. There's no way you're ever taking my child away from me ever again. And that familiarity that we build when we have a chance to take care of and love a child that needs us and loves us back, builds a bond that cannot even be imagined by the people that are asking that kind of question. And it usually doesn't even take them very long for that love and that bond to build. What's been your experience with that, Donna?
Well, I can tell my experience from me personally, and then from the many people that I've watched. And of course, my own personal experience matters the most to me. And that's that I've adopted 3 boys. And I've never had any biological children, so I can't imagine how I could love any more. But I was up in a meeting earlier today, and one of my boys poked his head in, and that wailing of love for that young man. And I thought, could anyone love a child more? If they were biological or adopted, we choose to love, and we love. And so I don't think that is ever an issue. Now, is it an issue for what people might say and things like that? Well, yeah, those are issues. And some of those issues we'll discuss. Those become challenges that every adoptive family has to face, is what other people say. But this show is going to be about exploring some of those issues.
Yeah. Donna, I'd like to go back to a point that you made a few minutes ago. You talked about that church leader when LDS Family Services was getting out of adoption, who told you, we want you to step up. We want the LDS community to step up. And I believe in the press releases, they even said when they were getting out of adoption that they want the number of adoptions to increase.
Right.
And that hasn't happened.
It has not.
The number of adoptions within the Latter-day Saint community is decreased radically. I believe you were telling me earlier that there was about 620 adoptions in 2007. And then when they got out of adoption in 2013, that number had decreased to about 200. It was less than a third of what it had been before. What do you think are some of the reasons why those numbers of adoptions decreased before they got out and then have decreased since LDS Family Services got out of adoption?
Yeah, when we think about adoption, there's multiple ways to adopt. There's the adopt, what we call an independent adoption, where you know a neighbor or somebody, and they want to place their child for adoption with you, and you just work with an attorney, and that's an independent adoption. Then there's agency adoptions. LDS Family Services was an agency where the agency takes responsibility for the child, finds the family, and does the connection that way. Then there's international adoptions, and then there are foster care adoptions. Each of those types of adoptions has had reasons why they have decreased. But I'm going to address the issue of what happened with LDS Family Services adoptions. The biggest challenge there is not so much that there's not the same number of birth moms that want to place their children for adoptions. It's that the demographics of those birth mothers changed. With LDS Family Services, most women who placed their children for adoption were younger. They were unwed. They had some sort of faith, and they chose to place their children for adoption because of their age, their financial, and their faith. That has changed. The demographic of a birth mother now is that she's on average 27 years of age. She almost always has other children. She will be financially struggling. And there may not be the support that she needs. And so she makes those decisions based more upon need than other reasons. And that change happened. And so they weren't coming to LDS Family Services in the same way. However, they still come. There's still women out there. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure that the voice that we put out into the community is that you have help to women that are considering adoption, that they have these choices. They can do an abortion, they can parent the child, or they can do an adoption. If they don't feel like they're in a position to parent the child, we want them to be able to come and do an adoption. Now, many of those women are looking for faith-filled families. They're looking for LDS families. Some of them ask for that by name. Others just simply ask for families that are full of faith. And in the adoption world, being full of faith is vital because so much about adoption is out of their control. So the change in the demographics was one of the reasons why the church, the number of adoptions went down. A second reason was that the needs, because these women, the demographics changed, and now they're 27, they have all their children, they needed things that the LDS Family Services adoption was not set up for. They needed many times homes. They needed housing. They needed financial support. They needed things that just to be able to bring life to this child. So that helping and support of a birth mother was not built in as much with the adoption services. And we could see that that was a necessity that needed to happen. Some of the politics of the world were changing at that time, where it felt like a secular agency as opposed to a religious agency may fit the bill for these women a little bit differently.
Another thing that they said in their public statements when they got out of adoption is that they wanted to grow the global church, right? The services they provided in one place, they wanted to be able to provide globally. And this was a service that was really only offered in the United States, and it was very hard to provide that to a global church. So kind of standardizing across the church.
So a few years ago, I had needs of a service of an attorney. And as I was sitting there visiting with this attorney, he found out what I did. And he says, well, we tried to adopt. And I said, oh, well, why didn't you do it? He says, well, we were with LDS Family Services and, then they stopped. And I said, well, why didn't you just, keep trying? We didn't know what to do. We didn't know where else to go. I said, well, no, let's help you do this. And I wondered how many hundreds of other families are out there with a similar story.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of families out there who would love to adopt and bring a child into their family, but they don't know how. So that's what this show is about. That's what you're saying is
for sure
us stepping up, answering that call, and helping to increase the number of children that are able to be adopted by Latter-day Saint families.
One of the things that we're doing, and Nathan and I are working together, and we hope to revolutionize the world of adoption. We really do. We recognize that there's adoptive families that want birth mothers to know that they're out there. We know that there's birth mothers who want to connect with adoptive families. We also know that there's adoptees that want to connect with their biological families. And we know that there's children, that these children may be waiting in foster care. These children may be waiting in orphanages. There are children out there that are in need of of a permanent, eternal family. I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam, a year or so ago, and I went to several orphanages that they wanted to show me the children, because they knew of my love. And I loved the children. I loved seeing them. And the orphanages were wonderful. They sang and they fed them and they were good with them. But I remember going into one room and seeing this little girl that was laying on this wooden board, and that was her bed. And, it was fine that it was a wooden board, but she wasn't feeling good. She was sick, and she was hugging this little stuffed animal. And I sat there and I looked at her and I thought, she needs a mom. She needs a mom that will lay down by her and hug her. And she doesn't have that. And that need for family, that need for somewhere that this is my home, not just in this life, but in eternity. That is this basic need that we all have. And we have families out there that have that desire to be that family for that little girl and many, many others. And we know of these children that need those families. And the objective we have of this podcast and of the project that we're doing is to bring those families and children together. Nathan, why don't you tell them just a little bit about what we're trying to do?
Yeah, so Eternal Families Adoption will be a podcast, and we're going to publish once a week, I think is our goal. And we're going to tell great stories. We're going to find these stories of Latter-day Saint families and eternal families that have been created through adoption. And we're going to bring experts from many different organizations and backgrounds and locations, and get them to share their expertise. So where Donna was sharing that those people hadn't pursued adoption because they didn't know how, they didn't know what to do. We want to solve that problem. We want you to know how to do it. We want you to know what to do. We want to give you actionable step-by-step instructions so that you can do what's within your power. And we're going to do some things that are a little bit different that I think you're going to be excited about. We're going to offer a service that allows hopeful adoptive families to list their information on Eternal Family Adoptions. And Donna, can I tell them? Can I tell them what's going to make you so different?
Tell them a little bit, because it's really exciting. Yeah. No, you tell them.
We're going to use AI in some really cool ways to help facilitate matching. And I think the profiles might even be free, or at least free. Imagine an adoption profiles site with Latter-day Saint families on there where families that have home studies and are able to adopt can list their profiles for free. And women that are pregnant considering adoption can go in and find those families and not be impeded from finding the right family because of cost.
And one of the things we're also going to do, we want to reach out to women that are wanting LDS families. They have a faith. They grew up in the faith. They've heard about it. We know that the reach of the church is growing and growing. We know that people hear about the Mormon Church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there may be the old things that they hear, but what they hear more than anything else is that they're good people and that they're family-centered and they love their children and they're educated and they spend time with their family. And every birth mother I have ever known, that's what the family she wants. I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what do you want in a family? And they will always say, I want someone who will really love my child. And then they may go on to say, and make sure that he or she gets an education. And that she has a faith, that the very things that the LDS family community can offer is what they're wanting. So we want to get the families, and we want to let the women that are considering adoption know that they're there. But even more than that, we want women to know that they have a choice. We want them to know that in this world where it's a battle between pro-life and pro-choice, and that she may feel, I don't want to do an abortion. And we get women all the time that will say that to me. They'll say, well, I don't want to do an abortion. They'll either say, I don't believe in abortion, or I had an abortion and I didn't like it, or for whatever reason, they don't want it, but they know they can't parent this child. We want to support those women and have them be able to bring life to this child, and then have them find a family that they can connect with, and that they know that child is going to do great there, and that they will be connected to them not only in this life, but throughout all eternity. And that matters to them. That's what this is doing.
Besides adoptive families and birth parents, what are some of the other people that are going to find value from this show?
Of course, adoptees. Adoptees, I'm raising 3 of them. And I love my boys, and I see the struggle they have. Adoptees struggle with their own sense of identity. We want people to know that if they're adopted, they're still a part of a family in the same way as if they were biologically based. Nathan, you have some thoughts on that. Share with me your thoughts.
One of the ideas that Donna and I have been talking about is leveraging the technology of DNA testing to facilitate adoption reunions, where right now a lot of people were adopted and were part of a closed adoption. They don't know who their birth mother was or is. We're going to allow technology to help connect those people, where we can have these adoptees and these birth parents take DNA tests and help facilitate reunification through that system.
Now, we don't want people to be afraid that there's going to be some kid that knocks on their door if they placed him for adoption 20 years ago. All of these things will be done with support. We've got great counselors that will support this process. But I remember being in the foyer of our church one time, and I won't tell you her name because many of you would know her. But she was 80 years old, and she came to me, and she knows what I do. And she said, Donna, can you help me? I said, anything I can do. And she began to cry. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I was adopted when I was young. I just would like to know who my biological family is. I said, you don't know? And she said, no. I said, well, tell me about how the adoption occurred. And she told me her story a little bit. And I said, well, have you checked with these people or these people? And she said, I have, but I haven't been able to get any answers. And what struck me is how this amazing 80-year-old woman, amazing. And like I said, if I told you her name, many of you would know who she was. One of the friendliest, kindest, most generous people I have ever known. But when she thought about her identity and she thought about her biological roots, she cried. And what we have learned over the years is we want to protect the privacy of all people involved in the adoption community. We want to assure security and permanency in adoptions. But we also want to make sure that the adoptee has the opportunity to get the answers that they need about who they are. All of us need to know who we are. That's the basis of much of what we do in the church, is understanding I am a child of both God and other people. And that matters to us. And so we want to make that opportunity available.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember more than a decade ago getting a call from someone who owned an adoption agency. And she had a birth mother who had gone on in her life to be incredibly successful with real estate, had made huge fortunes, enormous amounts of money, been wildly successful. And she had been suicidal. And there was a piece of her that was just missing because she didn't know where this child was. She didn't know if this child was safe. She didn't know where this child was in her life. And so this adoption agency director called me. It's like, what can you do for my friend? Can you find this child? And within a few hours, we had found the child. And we helped reach out to her, helped facilitate this connection. And the adoptee was working in a Home Depot in Florida. Her adoptive parents had divorced. Her adoptive mother had died of cancer the year before. She was left with no family. And being able to reunite with that birth mom in the right season of life for both of them was a really, really fun experience to be able to be part of.
Thank you, Nathan. That is a sweet story. So we kind of want to conclude by letting you know that we're starting this podcast and invite you to subscribe, invite you to do whatever it is you do with podcasts so that you know when we're on, and we'll try to share things with you that will make your adoption journey possible, easier, faith-filled, and something that will matter to all those involved.
Yeah, one of the best things that you can do is go to eternalfamilyadoptions.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Put your email address in. That way we can let you know when new features launch on the site. We can let you know when cool new episodes come out, and just send them right to your email box so you don't have to remember to come check in and find out when we have new episodes. Would love to keep you informed of what we're trying to build. Would love you to be part of our community, and would love to build this together.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for joining this episode of Eternal Family Adoptions. I'm Donna Pope. Every child deserves not just a home, but a forever family rooted in love and faith. So visit our website, eternalfamilyadoptions.com, to access faith-based adoption resources and sign up for a newsletter. And join us next time as we continue this journey together.